Welcome to today's edition of Tech Tuesday by Full Sail University. Today's discussion, freelancing in tech, a career as in tech as a remote worker. I am Luis Garcia, Vice President of Emerging Technologies at Full Sail University. We have a great panel today of Full Sail University graduates. Welcome, everyone. Um, First, we're going to have Mr. Grant Shonkwiler. He's a consultant for AAA games with many clients, uh, and such as Epic Games and Fortnite and many others. Also a Full Sail University Hall of Famer. Second, we have Miss Brandy Morgan. She's a self-proclaimed tech freelancer and has a whole channel where she teaches people how to be a tech freelancer. Very happy to have her. And my friend Danilo Campos as a consulting engineering manager for mobile applications. And I'm going to be calling each of you and asking you so you can introduce yourselves. So let's start with you, Grant. What are you and what are you working on?
What am I? So I'm a 2008 game design and development graduate, and I've been making games ever since then. I started in the industry as a programmer. I became a designer and then a lead designer in the touchscreen mobile space. And then I moved into AAA games where I was a producer at id Software and Epic Games. And I shipped a bunch of stuff. And then I took a sabbatical for a few months, wrote a book, and people started offering to give me money to give them advice. And so I figured I should probably start a company. And I'm a really narcissistic person, so I named the company Shonk Ventures after myself, because that's apparently what you get to do when you're a freelancer. So that's cool. And I gave myself the job title of Commander in Shonk because I'm not boring. But I have learned that I should just put consultant because people have no idea what I do when I say Commander in Shonk. But so I've been doing that now for 3 years, and I work with clients all over the world on different projects. I'm, different size teams, from small mobile teams of 3 to 4 people to large projects of 50, 60 people. The only project I'm currently working on that is public is a game called Fractured Veil, that is in alpha. So it's like super early, going to be in early access soon. So I'm a lead designer / producer consultant on that project. But I have about 6 other projects that I'm working on that I'm unfortunately not allowed to show. That's me.
Thank you so much, Grant. I was going to Miss Brandy Morgan. So what are you now? What are you working on, Brandy?
Hi, like you said, my name's Brandy Morgan. I graduated 2016 from the Web Development and Design program. I also got perfect attendance while at Full Sail, so that I'm very proud of that. If you went to Full Sail, you know that's tough to do. But yeah, after school, I went and worked at an agency. I had interviewed with a bunch of the big tech companies, and that was a really, really fun experience. After agency, I went and worked at a startup in Orlando doing React Native development. That was like my specialty when I was at Full Sail, or what I was specializing in, React and React Native. And while I was there, I started teaching people, doing like workshops, if that makes sense, for groups of people. And that led me to working with Treehouse, creating a course for them. And that was kind of like my first introduction to freelancing for courses. And so that was really, really fun. And then I decided, well, I could probably make more money doing this by myself than having to go into an office every day. And it was true. And so I left about 9 months into working at the startup, and I just started just hustling, trying to get clients and, make money to pay off my Full Sail debt. So that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you, Brandy. Danilo, perhaps a different path for you. Please share where are you, and what are you working on?
A little bit. I studied film and got my degree in entertainment business back in 2005. Um, when the iPhone materialized around 2007, I knew that that was going to be a big thing. I'd spent my entire childhood studying science fiction, studying and so I knew that as soon as you had handheld computers, you were in the future. And so if the handheld computer was here, well, there was something momentous about to happen. And so I went into debt to purchase an iPhone because I needed to know how it worked. And then a year later, as soon as the iPhone became a thing that you could write code for, I dove into figuring out how to do that. And right as the financial crisis hit, I actually quit my job to go full-time building apps because I needed to do that with my time. Now, inevitably, what happens at that point at 2010 or so is that Silicon Valley had a desperate need for any sort of iPhone expertise that could exist. So I got sucked up by the venture capital casino, spent several years doing that. Eventually, I got tired of having shitty bosses and decided to go on my own. And somehow that worked out. What I do these days is engineering management on a consulting basis. And so I often show up to a company that has ambitions for a mobile project. They have no idea how to get it started. They don't have in-house expertise for the very specific components needed to make a mobile app work. And so I kind of sit at the intersection of engineering project management, product design, and software development so that as a one-person team, I can get the first kernels going of an MVP and help companies build out both that first version and, if they're interested, build out a whole mobile team based on my guidance.
That's super cool, Danilo. So thank you for your introductions. We'll go over, for those that are watching on Facebook, thank you for joining us. We will go over some questions for the first 30 minutes of today's hour. And then please, as you watch, I will encourage you to send your questions in the comments on Facebook, and then our team will pick up those questions and send it to ask our panelists in the second half of the program, in the second 30 minutes. So let's dive right in. So I am older than all of you. So when I was a programmer back in the 90s, and I first started my career being hired as a programmer since and I used to freelance in the side to supplement my income because programming wasn't that hard those days. It didn't pay that much back then. And so you could already write software remotely those days, so which allowed me to have clients anywhere. But once I started getting paid better, I stopped. And sometimes I would take clients from here and there if I was in between jobs to pay the bills. But once I deliver the project, I will take on my full-time job and never quite make the leap to living off the freelancing. So all of you have already touched on this, but I'd like to give me a little more specific about how did you decide to make freelancing your full-time job? And I'll start with you, Grant.
Yeah, so I've been working in the studio environment for almost 10 years, and I liked it, but I burned out on kind of the amount of like time. You're just there all the time working in games. You work, if you work a 40-hour week, that's a blessing. And so I took a break and I traveled all over, and I spent 6 weeks in Australia, and I stayed with a friend, a couple, and they both are remote freelancers. And the day that I decided I want to try and figure this thing out was I wanted to go to the beach. I'm on sabbatical, so I'm on vacation. So I'm like, I'm going to go to the beach today. And they're like, we'll come with you. And I'm like, it's a work day. And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. And so we jumped on the train, and they both pulled out their laptops, and they were typing while we were on the train to the beach. We got to the beach. They put their laptops away. We finished what we were, hanging out at the beach. We got back on the train. They pulled out their laptops and they type. And we get back home, and, everybody takes showers, gets ready, and then I'm like, well, I'm going to go get dinner, but I know you have to work. And they're like, we worked already. I'm like, what do you mean you worked already? They're like, oh, we just, coded while we were on the train, and that was like 4 hours. That's good enough for today. And I was like, what? How do I do that? And so that was like the kernel of wanting to do it. And then I started to write this book, and the book is about managing teams in the game industry. And eventually we made another one that is about just managing technology teams, and then made one about managing teams remotely. And so the book kind of got out there in the wild, and I was at the Game Developers Conference, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, my CEO wants somebody to look at this project and give some advice on this specific aspect that I know you have expertise in." So we went and had a lunch meeting, and he showed me the stuff, and I gave him some feedback. And like the next day, I get an email that's like, "Hey, we want to pay you for your time, and we want you to do this for like 5 hours a week." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And they asked, "What's your company name?" And I was like, "Huh, I don't know." Okay. So I made a company, and then I just happened to reach out to a few other people and say, "Hey, I'm doing this thing now." And the first person to contact me was actually a Full Sail student, graduate who I had met when they were a student. And they said, "Hey, my company's working on this project, and they could use some help from someone like you." And I was like, "Okay." And so that was my second client. And then it kind of just snowballed from there. And some of them I've been working with for 2 to 3 years, and some of them, I'll work with for 6 months or something like that. So that's how I got into it.
Oh, that's great. How about you, Brandy? How do you decide to make freelancing your full-time job?
Yeah, like I said before, building a course for Treehouse, that really opened my eyes to working for other people on my own time. So that was really inspiring. And my family, like I still live in Florida, and my family does not live here. And so I want to travel and see them more and be able to be with them for like 3 or 5 weeks at a time. And most companies don't let you just take off like that. And so that was one of the other biggest reasons. And so right after that, I started to figure out a way to like replace my income. So getting clients that I knew would be solid for at least like 6 months to a year before I actually left my job. And doing that obviously really helped. So the transition was quite smooth as far as like financially, which is a huge reason. That's, why you work most of the time. And so, yeah, I loved it. I've been freelancing now for 3 years, a little over 3 years full time. And so it was just, to me, the freedom, it's worth it. It's worth it more than the financial aspect of it. I would rather be able to sit in my office. My husband's right over there. He has a SaaS company. He's also a programmer. And so we get to work together, and we love it. And that was like the biggest draw to be a freelancer. And you can make more money if you know how to like find big clients and hunt them, or so to speak. Like there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Thank you, Brandy. That's great. How about you, Danilo? How do you decide to make freelancing your full-time job? You did talk a little bit about it, but let's go a little deeper. Any moment that you decided to do it?
Oh, yes, there was a moment. And I was very lucky because circumstances conspired to create the moment. It started off with me volunteering with an organization that's very dear to me. They're called Code 2040. And they help improve diversity in the tech industry by helping Black and Latinx young people in college get into jobs and supporting them in internships, that kind of stuff. So I was volunteering there. I met somebody who introduced me to a very wealthy individual who needed someone to tutor his kid. He's like, "Hey, my kid really wants to learn how to make iPhone apps. Can you teach him?" And I started, and it was great. And so I was doing this in the evenings. I was working full time, and this was not enough money that I could just like go and do only that. But it was some money coming in every month, and in addition to my regular salary. And my boss was a jackass, just one of the worst human beings I've ever worked with. And at one point he starts yelling at me about something. It was completely out of pocket. It was inappropriate. And I was like, you don't get to do that. And I'm leaving. Which is a difficult thing to do in San Francisco because the rents were obscene, and that they've even grown worse. But so I was out of a job, and I had this one client who was having me very regularly teach this kid how to code, and I had to figure it out from there. Now the good news was this was during a time when it was boomtown, so there was plenty of companies who needed help. I had a decent network that got me the introductions I needed to get the clients who could pay the fairly substantial rates that I needed people to pay in order for me to have a roof over my head still. And so it wasn't something that was entirely planned, but it was something that I made the most of. And then once I kind of got my legs under me, it was a game changer, and it is my preferred way to work.
Those are three very different ways in which people decided to live off freelancing. So, which tells you that there can be different reasons and different paths for it. But once you're in it, there are things that you all have to do. So, back to my terrible example, and my clients were my friends, people that, like Danilo says, people that I knew they needed a particular problem solved. So I was kind of like a programming, like a hired gun for programming. I will, solve a very particular problem, ship it, and be fine with that, because for me it was supplemental income. So I never had to worry about how to market myself and how to price a project. They would ask me to do a form, which those days was a big deal. And I would charge them a couple $100. They would pay me for it. It was easy. But once you make a living of it, it becomes a lot more complicated. So I like for you guys, how do you decide how to price your services, and how do you get clients? And I'm going to start with you, Brandy, because you seem to be very sophisticated in this.
I don't know about sophisticated, but for me, when I was actually just ending Full Sail and starting my career, so to speak, I really saw the value in building a personal brand. And I made that a huge priority. So at first I started on Twitter, and that led to interviews like with Microsoft, and even working with Microsoft on like contract levels. And then I started building on Instagram, YouTube, because that just added credibility to who I am, but also I made it very businessy. So like a lot of my content was around programming, any sort of technical tech stuff. And so for getting clients, that is probably, or that used to be my number one way. People would just come in through my socials and ask me for work. And then now it's gotten to be just referrals. It's primarily referrals right now, which is great. I'm not complaining, because then I usually know that the people I'm going to work with are vouched for by people I've already worked with. And so I can either make a decision based on that if I want to work with them or not. And as far as pricing is very like a difficult thing, because I consider myself a Jill of all trades. So I don't just do like websites or web apps. I've managed a CTO's Twitter, and he paid me like $3,000 a month. And I just managed his Twitter. So, I mean, there's a bunch of different things, and you kind of have to get creative with the stuff that you're doing. It just depends on what you want to do. One of the reasons why I left a full-time job was I like doing different things. I don't like doing the same thing every single day. So I've been paid to edit videos, do design work, do web work, do digital marketing, all sorts of different things. And so the pricing of those things is drastically different from one to the other. So.
Thank you, Brandy. Danilo, how do you get your clients, and how do you know how much to charge?
So finding clients has been an interesting challenge in recent years, because I kind of took a break from doing mobile work to explore other avenues of tech. And at the end of the day, I love building apps. I love the whole engineering management process. And so I wanted to get back into this. My network had gone a little bit cold. And so one avenue I explored this year was doing a little bit of spear fishing, where I knew that because of what I charge, I really only need like a couple of really solid clients and I'm good for the rest of the year. And so for me, what I looked at is what is the one place that every single person who I would want to work with, what is the one place where they are reading the news constantly? And for me, that's a website called Daring Fireball. It's at daringfireball.net. And it's an indie publisher. It's a dude who works out of his house and he writes about the Mac, he writes about Apple, he writes about iPhones, all that stuff. And you can buy a sponsorship for the site for a decent chunk of change. You can sponsor for an entire week. So I swallowed hard. I pulled out my credit card and I sponsored the site for a week. And now I'm fully booked and busy. So that works. And being really strategic about the advertising that you're doing, it can work. It's probably the only thing that would have done the job. It's probably the only way I could have traded money for clients as I think about it. So I'll have to be creative again in the future and come up with new ways, but that's my most recent. In terms of pricing, it's pretty straightforward. The way I look at it is I've got a very specific skill set that the market already has established a price for. And that is, if you look at what people are getting paid in the tech industry to do this kind of work, it's all salaries between, from $100,000 and up. And so what I do is, like, if we assume 100K, just for simple math, right? We're talking about 100K for a 42-hour work week, 49 weeks a year. That's 258 hours that we're dividing into 100K. So that gets you around $50 an hour. Except that's only cash. We're not talking about all the expenses that you need to add on to it, right? So when you're a freelancer, you have to worry about things like your health insurance. You have to worry about a rainy day fund for if you get sick and you can't work. You got to think about all these things for yourself. So let's add another 25% on top of that. So now we're into the $60 range per hour. But that's still not enough money, because when you are being paid for as a salaried employee, they're essentially buying you, like you go to Costco, you buy an enormous bag of almonds, right? Like you're getting a bulk discount on all those almonds. And so an employer is getting a bulk discount on all your time because they're buying out all of it. You're safe. You've got all this money coming in for the rest of the year. If you're freelancing, you do not have that kind of security. You have to kind of live hand to mouth, hope that you find the next client and the next client and the next client. You're giving your client a lot of flexibility because they do not have to spend, they don't have to commit to spending more money on you than their immediate needs require. And so now you got to take that $60 or so, you got to double it. Now you're into, say, the low hundreds, $125 an hour, something like that. That's just a base thing, right? But now you got to look at your offering and say, all right, are you specialized in ways that are particularly useful? Is there a particular skill set that you have that not everyone else has, right? And so the more you can specialize, the more you can tack money on top, on top, on top, on top. And so it's a very straightforward thing. If you've got a specialized skill set, if you've got a particular thing that everybody needs done and there isn't a lot of other people who can do it, you can get up to $150, $200, $250 an hour for some of this. And so the way I like to do it is I position myself at a premium place like that, and I bill on a specific hourly thing, completely planning ahead, like, all right, we're going to do this much work up to this many hours. Nobody's surprised when the invoice comes.
Wow. What a great explanation of the whole thing. Thank you so much, Danilo. How about you, Grant? How do you get your clients, and how do you know how much to charge?
When I started, I was lucky that somebody walked me through that exact process. The only two things that are a little different for me, and then I'll come back to your first question. The only two things that are a little bit different for me is I almost always charge hourly, and then I'll do the same thing where I'll say, hey, it's probably going to be this amount of time. And if somebody is giving me like a guaranteed amount of hours for a specific amount of time, I'll discount them some. But I always say, like, this is my base rate, and I'm going to drop 10% because, I'm working 100 hours for you, as opposed to, some of my consulting clients I work 4 hours a month for, right? So if it's someone like that I'm working 4 hours, they get the premium. they're paying the most that I charge. Other people pay a little bit less. The other thing is, you have to measure the space. So I did the whole exercise, and I don't remember how much it was, but the first client I talked to, I was like, I don't know, like $300 an hour, and they're like, bye. And I was like, maybe I did that a bit much. And then the next client, I lowballed myself, and the guy said yes before I even finished saying the amount. And I was like, oh, I lowballed, right? Because he didn't come back. So those are just lessons that you learn of, like, what is that happy middle space in your industry that you're freelancing in? Because I am very specialized. I'm in a very specific space. But if I'm working with an indie team, charging $300 an hour is like their entire budget, as opposed to these bigger companies. So I also do that. The bigger companies, I charge a little bit more. As far as how I get clients, I like what Brandy was saying about being like a Jill of all trades. When I was speaking to my friends who were doing freelance, I was like, how do I do this? How do I get clients? And they said, if someone approaches you and says that they're interested in working with you, and they ask you to make a cupcake, what are you going to do? I was like, oh, I don't really know how to make a cupcake. And they're like, you're going to go learn how to make that cupcake, and you're going to make the best cupcake they've ever eaten. And then they're going to come back and ask you to do something else. And this really happened to me. I don't really build websites, but I've done like 5 or 6 websites because people come to me and they're like, hey, I hear you know technology. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, can you build me a website? And I'm like, sure. And I always like charge some ridiculous amount because I don't really want to do it. And then next thing I know, I'm like working for some random technology company that they're friends with, working on a new technology for aerospace engineering. And I spent like a year working with this aerospace company. I have no aerospace industry experience, but I have technology experience. And it was just because a random person was like, can you build me a website? And I love airplanes, so it was an amazing opportunity to get to spend time around private jets and things like that. So that's kind of like, if someone comes to you, you just say yes. You give them a price and you say yes. But most of my clients have come. I have a very large network. I've spent a lot of time in the industry speaking and going to events and meeting people. So a lot of that comes from there. Some come from my books. Like 2 or 3 clients have come from Full Sail students that are now graduates that I met when they were students. And years later, they've called me and been like, hey, my company needs somebody to fill this spot really quickly. And then the last way is I'm friends with just a bunch of people that also are freelancers and consultants in the industry. And we obviously have a limited amount of hours. And so we kind of just push clients back and forth to each other if we can't do something. So I've had a couple that way where I have a friend who is, he's more senior than me. He's been doing this longer than me. And so he'll push people towards me. So it's been, you just kind of take them as they come. You have a good landing platform, a good website, a good, easy place for them to see. If you have a social media presence, that's clean, right? Like I don't talk about anything but games on my social media. And you're just ready to answer the questions and have a number in mind pretty quickly. Because I found that I guess the last bit of advice on this is I'll have these calls with people and they'll ask me for the amount, and I always give them the amount because some people, and early on I would do this where they'd be like, how much are you going to charge? And I'd be like, oh, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. And then I would spend way too much time figuring it out, and I would give them a number and then they would just ghost me. So now I have a number in mind. I ask some pre-questions before we chat, and then I give them that number because I don't really want to spend more than an hour to 2 hours for free on anything. So yeah. Sorry, I kind of went all over there, but answered.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. I want to remind everyone that to please submit your questions that you're watching. We're getting to the bottom of the hour, so I'd love to start addressing people's questions. If you can send some, or if not, we'll continue asking. We have plenty of questions to ask.
If I could just throw something on there, Luis.
Go ahead.
One of the beautiful things about freelancing too is that, let's say you're a cheesecake guy and somebody shows up about the cupcake, and like you got your cheesecakes for a while, You can just tell them I don't do cupcakes. And that is a thing that the further you get in it, the more flexibility you get. Is that if there's a particular kind of work that you just don't enjoy doing, you can just tell people no. And if there is one thing above any other about freelancing that I think recommends it as a career direction, it's the amount of self-determination you can get. There's a lot of really cool stuff that you can get by just seeing where it goes in terms of a client with an interesting thing. But if there's a thing that you're experienced with and you know you don't like it, getting to the point where you can just say no to a job is one of the coolest things, because it lets you have self-determination on a level that you don't really get in salaried work. So you have both paths open to you. And I think that's really cool and exciting.
Actually, that was going to be my next question. Because when the little freelancing I did, there were projects that I would say no. Somebody came for a massive thing. I was like, I don't need to do this. And so I would just say no. And so I imagine that because time is limited, that you have to be very precise and into how you spend that time, even if you like different things, like Brandy mentioned. So I'm going to go to Brandy, given that you already answered that question, Danilo, and ask you: is there a type of project that you prefer? And also, is there a type of project that you reject? Go ahead, Brandy.
Type of project that I prefer. Lately I've been working with a ton of e-commerce, with brands or essentially like influencers, with big followings that are trying to launch a product, sell it online, so that's been really fun. It's been a huge change for me. Before I just would take on, I worked primarily in the tech space with some like really big name companies, which I love doing, but then that also just kind of gets you just sucked into this, I don't know, this like whole world of billion-dollar corporations, and there's not enough, like a lot of flexibility in the work that you get to do. And so working with people that are just like kind of thinking for themselves and kind of coming up with how to do it on their own. And a lot of these people are extremely creative, that I've been gravitating a lot towards, because it gives me freedom in the work that I get to do, and also be more creative with the type of work. So that's definitely where I'm at right now, and the type of stuff that I like working on.
Any kind of work that you like to reject?
Well, if I don't ever like say no, kind of like what Grant was saying, but I will put a bigger price on the project. And if they say yes, then that's amazing. But if they say no, then it's not a huge deal, so.
I think that was a technique that Grant already mentioned, and charge them a lot for something you don't want to do. So the question goes to you, Grant. Is there a type of project that you prefer and a type of project that you reject?
So when I started out doing freelancing, I was just doing consulting. So I was doing a lot of leadership consulting, working with C-level people to give them executive coaching and stuff like that. And I like that, and it pays really well. But I realized after a few months, I really need to be involved in the making of games. And so I kind of have my clients set up in a way that they kind of pay for each other. And so I do the consulting thing, which is, each client is a few hours a month. They pay a top rate, and they kind of subsidize the other things that I do that I consider a little more altruistic or more fun. So the next level is just straight freelancing, where I'm involved in a project as a designer or producer, and that keeps my hands in a game and keeps my mind fresh in that aspect. And then the kind of the lowest tier of pay is working with indie companies, because they just can't afford to pay a normal rate. So what I do is I allow these bigger corporations to subsidize me to give advice to indies. And specifically, what the groups that I'm trying to focus on are amplifying voices that just don't exist in the game space. So working with countries, game studios in countries that just don't have game studios, right? They don't have anybody to go talk to in their space that has 15 years experience. or just trying to bring new people into the industry. So while those people don't necessarily pay as much, it's kind of that feel good, knowing that I can be part of doing something significant and changing their lives, as well as potentially changing like the movement of the industry in their space. And they do still pay me. I don't do that stuff for totally free, but that's how I kind of have mine set up. As far as projects that I reject, if you had asked me pre-COVID, I probably would have told you a whole bunch of things. I would say as we're economically coming out of COVID, I'm starting to reject projects again. But there was a dip there in the middle. I think that a lot of freelancers hit, and there I wasn't rejecting any. But for me, I just want to work with good people. And so of the projects I've rejected, it's been because the people are jerks, or because I'm well connected in the industry. If I'm talking to a company, I'll kind of just put feelers out and I'll ask people if they know anything about a company. And I spoke to a studio a few months ago, and the project seemed really interesting. And the guy I talked to was really nice. And I put out feelers, and it turns out that the CEO is similar to Danilo's old boss, where he's just like the worst person. And he'd been blasted on Twitter and swept up in the Me Too movement and all that stuff. So I was just like, you know what? I don't want to deal with this. So that's really the luxury, is you get to pick who you work with. I feel like in my career, I've been very lucky to work with great people, but sometimes you go work in a studio environment, and those are the people that you now live with 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 40, 50 hours a week. And if you don't like one of them or many of them, or your boss, too bad. Like, you got to make a significant career change. Whereas in freelancing, you just kind of take the money, pull the plug, move on to something else. And you always have multiple things going on, right? So your brain is constantly working on different things. But also you can, I try and always have a solid revenue stream through everything.
Wow. What a wealth of experience we're getting here through the through different lenses. Now, every time I interview someone, and especially if they started something new, a company, or you guys as freelancers, there's always that thing like, if I knew then, fill in the blank, I would not have done this. And I'd like to go this one a little quicker so that we can get to other questions as people are starting to submit theirs. But if there is one thing you wish you knew when you started, and start with you, Danilo.
Don't mess around with your taxes. Don't do it. Pay your taxes, pay your taxes, pay your taxes. You pay them 4 times a year. You pay them in advance. Don't get into the death spiral of not having paid your taxes on time. Read a book, find an accountant, figure out your tax stuff ahead of time is all I'm saying.
Okay. I see both Brandy and Grant are laughing at this. Maybe it also happened to them. But Grant, is there a thing that you wish you knew when you got started?
I got an accountant right away because I worked with 3 international companies in my first year, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And he saved me thousands of dollars. So I can't recommend that one enough. But for me, this is actually more of a kind of rather recent learning, and it kind of comes with what everybody's talking about of once you're farther on in your career, and that's I'm starting to charge up front when a contract is signed, because I had an incident a few months ago where I signed a contract with somebody for a significant amount of work, and then they pushed that work back a long time, like 6 months, and I had already said no to a bunch of other clients. And so I was kind of SOL right at the beginning times of COVID. And like, understandable why they pushed it back, but it really screwed me. And so I'm charging, basically a signing bonus, something to lock me down for a significant amount of hours if somebody wants me for more time. So that's a new lesson that I've learned, and probably something you can't do early on, but just making sure that you're going to get paid. And the kind of B part of that is I never celebrate until the first paycheck. So my wife works in the traditional space. And so every time I sign a contract, she's like, let's celebrate, let's go get food or whatever, do this thing. And I'm like, it's not real until they pay me, right? Because I've also had that happen. I think every freelancer has had somebody just not pay them. And that sucks, but it's something that's going to happen. And, you know, your obvious thought, if you're not doing this about both of those, is why didn't you sue them? It's generally not enough money to sue somebody that it's worth to pay the lawyer, right? And so I have lawyer friends, and I always ask, like, should I sue this person? And they're like, if it's less than 10 grand, don't sue them. It's like, okay. So you just kind of, you know, SOL.
Thank you. How about you, Brandy? Is there a thing that you wish you knew when you got started?
Yeah, pigging back a little bit off of what both of them said, but Grant, yeah, I mean, my husband and I actually went in to do a project, a mobile app. I don't know if you guys remember the TV show. It was on Apple. It was about apps. I don't remember. So one of their contestants got picked by Gary Vee to like be their mentor or something. And so they actually contacted me to build their app, and we did the work, built the app in like 2 weeks worth of time. Didn't get paid for it. So that was like 30 grand, 40 grand lost. So even if you do have contracts, make sure they're looked over by a lawyer. And also, like, as far as taxes, always set aside money. No matter how much money you make, set aside part of it into, I have like a business savings account where that's where my tax money lives. Anytime money comes in, it directly goes into that savings. So I'm never worried at the end of the year how much I have to pay, because I know I have that set aside. And so just knowing that up front and being aware of how much you're going to have to owe at the end of the year if you pay your taxes quarterly, just be aware it's not your money. Like you have to pay your taxes. You don't want to have to deal with that. It can be a mess. Luckily, we don't have to go through that because we also have an accountant. But get that set up ahead of time and plan ahead.
Luis, I'm going to jump in real quick. One more bit of financial advice is set up a SEP IRA. It's similar to a 401k, but it's how you hide a bunch of money from the government and don't have to pay taxes. Like I consider myself a very financially savvy person. I've invested since I was 20 years old, and I wasn't fully aware of this. And when I went to meet with the accountant, he's like, you need X amount more money to put in here, and it'll save you like $3,000 on your taxes. So my suggestion would be, as soon as you start freelancing, contact an accountant. They're generally not going to charge you for advice. They're just going to charge you for actually doing your taxes. So contact someone pretty quickly and be like, hey, I'm doing this thing. What do I need to set up? So.
All right. So we got hire an accountant, pay your taxes, charge upfront, check your clients, charge more than you think you should charge. And so I imagine that, again, the your most valuable resource is your time. It's what you're selling to your clients, and we all have the same 24 hours, and you don't get to have more because you're a freelancer. And that capacity defines also how many clients can you take. Like Grant, you mentioned that it's a client that pays you for 3 hours, and Brandy goes to clients that give them bigger chunks of time for longer periods of time. But at the end, you just divided your time in some way. So within your own world, how many projects are you usually handling at the same time? I'll start with you, Brandy.
So it's about 3. I've heard people say, oh, get a ton of clients and, all this sort of stuff. I just say boo-hoo on that idea. I think you should actually limit the amount of people, because you only have so much brain space. So it's really honestly between 2 or 3. And I am aware of how long that contract is going to be. And so when it's approaching its end, I know I need to start looking for somebody else, or oftentimes a referral just always seems to just come in at the right time for that. But to me, I don't think for myself, I couldn't work on a ton of clients at one time. I wouldn't be doing my best job for them. And that's a huge part of it. You always want to be doing your best work because you do want those referrals or testimonials for your website. And so, yeah, I say for me, it's 2 to 3. I don't go any more than that. But maybe somebody on here is different or wants to give insight on that. And I also think it depends on the type of work you're doing. But for me, there's a lot of strategy now, like doing consulting, coming and having to think through things and also implementing them or helping them find people to implement that stuff. So 2 to 3, that's where I'm at.
That's great. So Danilo, how many clients do you usually have at the same time?
I generally do my best work when I'm shipping software, and taking something from 0 to version 1.0 is exhausting mentally. So at most, I can do 2 clients like that. And then I've got a third client, which is me. Like ultimately, all of this is in the service of subsidizing the projects that I want to work on. So being able to do enough work to keep the lights on, but also still have enough time left over so that I can do what I want to do, whether that's researching things or building new things or whatever. Maintaining that balance is really important to me. And so not watering that down with too many competing commitments where no one's happy. I think I 100% echo that advice.
No one happy, no one is happy, and that includes you. And
exactly.
Yeah, that's so. And Grant, how many clients do you usually have at the same time?
I'm the worst. I have 8 projects and 7 clients right now, but let's be very clear about this. Most of those clients are less than like 5 hours a week of work. So they have specific carved out time, and I do thought work, and then I meet with them and whatever it might be. And then a couple of those projects are, more than 10 hours a week. And again, time is carved out specifically for them. And, very similar to what everybody else has said, it's about doing your best work and your brain power and serving yourself. And so I've gone through different phases where I limit myself to like 35 hours of work a week or 30 hours of work a week. And I've gone up to 50 hours of work a week, but I try and stay around that 40-hour mark. But I try and stay below that 40-hour mark. And so again, every conversation I'm having with clients is, how many hours do you think you need me a week? Oh, it's going to be this many. That's not going to fit in here. So yeah, I have a lot, but my brain space is very segmented into what I'm doing. And so, like I said, some of these are just an hour to 2 hours a week. So, it probably works out to pretty much the same as what everybody else is talking about as far as the breakup. But yeah, that's how I work.
And there's
go ahead.
One piece of this that I think is really important. When you are a freelancer, once you've got the engine humming hard enough, you get to really determine the shape of your week. And for me, 30 hours is my hard limit. If I'm working a 40-hour week, I mess something up, right? So my goal for the way my year works is I want to be working about 30 hours a week, and I don't want to be working for other people more than 8 to 10 months a year, right? And so part of why working like this is very compelling is that you can structure your life in a way that would be fundamentally incompatible with a salary job, and it shows up in how your every day, your every week gets scheduled out.
That's very intentional, Danilo. I want to jump really quick as we're going into the ending, but I really would be remiss if I don't ask you about the times that we're living in terms of technology companies sending everybody home and letting them work from home. And it seems like everybody's doing what you guys have been doing for years. Do you see that as a permanent move? And is that good or bad? I'll start with you, Grant.
So first off, it was bad for me. So I do a lot of on-site work where I visit clients and spend time with them and observe, and that's where I'm teaching leadership and stuff like that. So that's where my clientele took a dip. Um, but I think now people are willing to have these things remotely. I think that technology companies specifically are realizing that they spend a lot of money on office space that they may not need, and so they're trying to figure out exactly what value they're losing in value work. I was having this conversation with a couple of VPs at Google this past week about what percentage of loss is expected when someone works from home versus during the pandemic versus working in an office. And they were saying that most people have a bump in productivity when it comes to technology when they work from home, just because so much of our work is thought work, and we need to just sit quietly and work. For example, when I started doing this compared to working in an office, I went from wearing big headphones and listening to music to literally just sitting in silence and working. And I thought I needed music to work, but I work so much better in the quiet, and there's no office noise, so it's great. So I think a lot of companies are learning if they can do this. I think there are things that are definitely lost, but you have to adjust your team to working remotely. That's why I wrote a whole book about this. But yeah, I think a lot of technology companies are gonna switch. Obviously, Twitter and Uber and a few other people have already made that decision.
How about you, Brandy? What do you think is going to happen with this? Is it good? Is it permanent?
I mean, I don't know. I can only speak for myself. I don't have children, and I enjoy working with my spouse. We're together all the time, but I know that's not the same for everybody. And I know if you have children, that adds another level of distraction. And a lot of people really enjoy going to the office. It's like that's their break. Or a lot of people, which I'm finding because I join conversations on Twitter about people talking about this, their commute time is their time where they get to listen to their Audible book or their favorite podcast. And it's a time alone that they get away from their family or their house or whatever it is. So I feel like there's pros and cons. I love working remote. I love working with my husband. And so for me, I could see the future allowing more people that want that. Because like Grant said, there is I feel that people are more productive when they have the freedom and kind of they can control their environment to a degree. That is very true for me. And like he said, I actually don't listen to music at all when I work now. I prefer just being in the silence, and I don't actually have to block out other people that are around me. So I would hope that companies let people that want to do it and that they prove that they can do it should have that option.
Danilo, anything you want to add?
Well, of course, you got to ask good for whom, right? I like working from home. I love my commute. It's great to walk 15 seconds down the stairs and boom, I'm at the office. I'm ready to go. But there are people who can't telecommute into work in order to make their capitalist exchange, right? You've got people working in facilities, people working in security, food service, all of these folks who are otherwise serving the needs and interests of these organizations that were co-located up until this year, who are now in a lot of cases facing a really uncertain future. So what happens for those folks? I think that there's a lot of inequities that exist in the knowledge work business broadly that are being magnified now by this kind of crisis. And I don't have a good answer for that, although I think that it's a very long, big structural conversation to be had about just how precarious all of us are feeling right now in general.
Thank you, Danilo. So we're getting to the end, and I always end my last question is always the same, and because I think that having brain like yours is important to for the future, and I'm a very big fan of technology, and I've been in technology for a very, very, very long time, and I feel like today is the most exciting time to be in technology, because a lot of things that have been in the works for 20, 30 years are reaching their peak, and which allows you to combine them to solve very important and complex problems. And that for me is very exciting. I think that a lot of the difficult problems of the world, notwithstanding the ones that Danilo are mentioning, will probably go through technology as part of the solution. And that's very exciting. So for you, what do you see in technology today that gets you really excited for the future? And I'll start with you, Danilo.
Anyone who talks to me for more than 30 seconds these days understands how excited I am about TikTok. And it's an app, it's a company, it's got whatever political drama going on with it. That's not what's important to me. When I look at the young people who are participating on TikTok, when I look at older people who are participating on TikTok and showing their faces and telling their stories and educating one another and building a consensus about what a just, decent, kind future would look like. What does the world that we want to live in look like? Those conversations are happening online in a way that does not have any historical precedent whatsoever. And so we've got a future being built in the consensus that is being negotiated by people of all ages, but especially by young people right now. And seeing the fruits of that materialize in business, in civic life, is going to be incredibly powerful over the next generation or so. So if we are able to dodge many of the bullets coming at us as a planet, as a civilization, I think it's going to be in part based on the conversations that are being enabled right now through digitally mediated means. And that, to me, is very exciting.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Danilo. Grant, what do you see in technology today that makes you excited about the future?
Wow. Thanks for calling me after that. What he said. No. Yeah, I think that I'll just speak specifically in games because that's what I know and that's what I love. I think it's a combination of two things. Games are returning to kind of where they were in the late 90s, early 2000s of being the third space that people gather in, right? So the theory is that you have your home and then you have work/school as your second space. What's the third space? And, watching people use Red Dead Redemption to have meetings or, just hanging out in Fortnite with their friends and having, conversations and discussing things is really exciting. And seeing games become that space for people is something that really excites me, and figuring out how to build spaces that encourage ethics, which is a big challenge that I'm working on right now. And then the other one is using games to educate people on, the world, right? So teaching people climate resilience, climate change, or, Lives Matter, whatever that might be, using that space to educate, because play is how we all learn. And it's how, if you look in the animal kingdom, that's how animals learn, right? Cats learn to hunt by just playing and jumping on each other. And so using games to educate in a way that is not, super obvious that it's educational, but you're learning something and instilling that as a being. Those are the things that are most exciting for me in games right now.
Thank you so much. And Brandy, you have the last word. What do you see in technology today that gets you excited about the future?
All right, this one might shock you, or might surprise you, but the low code to no code website builders, and there's a ton of them. One of them that comes to mind that I think is really cool is like Webflow. I think tools like that give people that do not have the ability to pay for an education make money, and they can make good money building stuff like that. I like to think of like single moms or like low income people that live in low income areas can learn a tool like Webflow. I think like Wix and even all like these places are starting to release these 0 to no code editors. And I think that's really cool. I think giving people the tools they need to earn money is really, really impactful and empowering. So that's what I think is cool. Even, even though like I like to code and all this sort of stuff, I like seeing that stuff come out, and I like seeing people use it and be able to start a web development or web design company and make money doing it. Or maybe they wouldn't have had that option before.
That's great. I don't think I ever gotten such a diverse answer to this question, and which is great. Today has been incredible. I want to thank you so much, Grant and Brandy and Danilo, for taking time out of your busy lives, especially you, which make a living out of using your time for others. So I cannot be more thankful. And I want to invite everyone online for our next edition of Text Tuesday, which will be 2 weeks from now, and it's going to be about cybersecurity, the digital defense systems. That will be on Tuesday, September 8th. And thank you so much, and see you very soon.